Okay, there we go. All right. Buildings, there's a lot of plastic in our buildings. And as we get older and fall to bits, we need replacement parts. And a lot of those are plastic embedded in us. So these are some of the applications, and these are ones where plastic is essential and really helpful. It's versatile, it's lightweight, it's durable, and we use it a lot. Now, you all came here from plastics, not quite sure, or you think they're terrible, even. Why do we do that? With all of these wonderful applications, why has plastic got such a bad name? Well, these are some of the reasons. There is concern, genuine concern, about security of resources, security of our petrochemical resources. So we use a lot of oil for fuel, but that's the source material for a lot of plastics. If we want to secure those for the future, we should be worrying about having something which is sustainable. So resources for when it gets more difficult to get oil out of the ground. That's one of it. But there are other things as well. And actually, what worries people the most is marine waste, in this case, killing animals, and plastic waste in the environment. So it's those bottom two, which are the real factors which make people anxious or cross about use of plastic. A few years ago, this man, David Attenborough, did a television series called Blue Planet, in which he focused on the marine environment and what plastics were doing to that environment was a big part of his story there. That had worldwide influence. There is something which environmentalists refer to as the Blue Planet effect, which is because of David Attenborough. So after that series, interest in plastics recycling and what we should be doing about plastics absolutely skyrocketed. And people started putting money towards effective end of use of plastics, improving recycling, making it easier to recycle, which we've been hoping would happen for a long time, but it got accelerated hugely as a result of that. Things went into reverse when COVID came along, because we started using a lot more plastics in a very unsustainable way. But I'm pleased to say that in the UK and to some extent internationally, trying to deal with this plastic problem is now coming back up the agenda. So that's altogether good. William McDonough is one of the gurus in the sustainability field. And he has this wonderful just encapsulation of our problems now. We used to be able to throw things away. Remember that? Things went away. Where is away now? Away is here. Away is someone's backyard. We now see that we inhabit a smaller and smaller planet. Away has become very close indeed. So we're talking about away here. So what do we use plastics for? We use them a lot. The one which I'm going to be focusing on particularly today is packaging, which is this blue bit here. Packaging. 38% of the plastics that we use are for packaging. Now, there are other big sectors here, and building and construction is another big one. But plastics are much more important for this because food packaging has a very short lifetime. You know, the effective use of packaging may be a matter of days, maybe longer than that, but averages a few days while packaging is doing the job that it was designed for. And that means that it goes round and round the life cycle route very fast. And we see it. If it's in buildings, it may be there for 50 years, it may be there more or less forever. So although there's a lot of plastic used in buildings, we don't see it and it's not such a big problem. So packaging is what we're talking about. So what's it for? So here are some familiar applications for plastic. If you've got liquids, you need to put in something. If you've got fragile items, you need to protect them in some way. And if you've got powders, you need to put them in something. The mechanical protection bit of plastic, so the egg box, for instance, that is really important. And I shall come back to that repeatedly, because that's one of the key factors that we're using plastic packaging for. And it avoids a lot of food waste. What else is it for? Well, it protects the contents from the environment. And that actually goes both ways. So stuff coming out of the food, like smells from our smelly cheese here, but stuff going in. So we prevent the atmosphere from getting at our food and causing it to rot. There may be protected environments, so there may be gases or there may be a vacuum inside the packaging, but the contents are protected from the environment. So, benefits of plastic packaging. So I've got a chart here, it's a bit too small for you to read, but there's traditional packaging and there's best plastic packaging. And what it's doing is increasing the life of the product, which I call the shelf life. And so if we look at one of these, if we look at cheese, then if you don't have cheese packaged, if you have it in just paper, then the cheese dries out. If it's in a shop, then usually after about 3 days, that cheese is not saleable because it's all dried up and cracked and people won't buy it. Just plastic package, yes, hello.
Can you wrap cheese in wax paper?
Yep, you can wrap cheese in wax paper, and that is less bad, it may actually be good, but that's true. The waxed paper may not be recyclable, so it may have turned it into something which is treated more like a plastic, but yes, that is absolutely true. So you know, I've been a little bit brutal in talking about the traditional packaging here, but that's all right, it makes the story a bit stronger.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll come back to cucumbers later as well, yes. So the cheese, the way in which cheese is actually packaged is very, very sophisticated. We have a multi-layer package. It's got 7, 9 layers of polymers which are co-extruded to form that thing that looks just like a plastic bag. It performs multiple functions, stops stuff from going in, stops some things from going out, but lets some bits go out so that cheese can mature in the package. It's an amazing material. We can make plastic package out of simpler materials, but we have to use a lot more of it, and that's environmentally bad. So there's a lot of good in plastic packaging here, and increasing the shelf life, increasing the lifetime of products is a big one. Okay, so here's a bit of technical stuff. Looking at the life cycle carbon footprint of food and the packaging used for that food. So this is a study that I did This is what research teams are for. They're doing things that I think are interesting. But people are interested as well. So we've got here cheese, the blue one, and chicken, and the red, which is the packaging. Now, the bigger the bar there, the bigger the environmental footprint, the carbon footprint, the global warming from that food. So, chickens grow quickly, you eat them, they're meat. You're a vegetarian, you think you're doing the right thing, you're eating cheese. That's cow cheese. And it's got a much, much bigger carbon footprint, global warming potential than chicken. It comes from cows, which are long-lived animals. They emit methane from both ends, but the birthing is actually more significant. And so actually, if you're looking at the carbon footprint, cheese is much worse than chicken. Right? Fact. Next fact, packaging. Where's that red line? You can't see it, can you? Tiny, absolutely tiny at the bottom. Packaging is contributing 1% typically of the global warming compared with the food. So, take home message from this slide. Food has a big environmental footprint. Anything that we can do to avoid food wastage is going to be environmentally really, really significant. And the packaging does that. Plastic packaging is doing it better than any other packaging on the whole. You're not liking these messages,
I'm liking it. I like it.
Good. So let's look and see what happens with that packaging. So what you want to be able to do is to recycle your packaging if you've got it. So what we've now got is a big red bar here. It's negative, which means that that's a good thing. That's saving CO2. But just look at the scale. You can't even see it there. I've had to magnify it 1,000 times before you can see it. So recycling is good, okay. Compared with the food wastage, it's trivial. But recycling is good for other reasons. As we've seen with the waste, the plastic getting out into the marine environment. But if you're just looking at climate change, global warming, it's nowhere. Right. What happens to our packaging? So UK perspective, but there are comparable stories throughout the world. What happens to UK polymers at end of life? Some of them get recycled in the UK, and this is the pictures of reprocessing in the UK. China introduced a ban on taking our rubbish, our plastic. In 2017, what happened in the UK? Virtually nothing. It didn't immediately trigger lots more recycling in the UK because what do? We don't send it to China, we send it to Turkey instead, or Poland, or other bits of Northern Europe. So we're still sending quite a lot of waste to Turkey. So it hasn't had the desired effect of boosting our recycling as much as it should. So what should happen to polymers at the end of life? Another slightly technical picture. This is my life cycle story of what happens to plastic. We make them, we make products, and then we throw them away. On the right-hand side, we've got the recycling that we can do with end-of-life plastic. The best one at the top, mechanical mechanical recycling, and at the bottom, less good, but other things that we can do. So our aim is really to get plastic from disposal back into making stuff. So this top arrow here, that's what we would really like to be able to do. So this is what we think of as recycling. So we've got our plastic, we clean it, sort it, put it into this machine here, close the handle, and here's the new plastic coming out at the bottom here, and it gets turned into pellets and then used to make new stuff. That's recycling. So why do we do it? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Well, actually, the real reason is a little bit more subtle. The real reason that we do recycling is that we don't have to make so much new polymer. That's the nub of it. That's what we're aiming for. So getting polymer back into the production loop and not having to make so much new polymer. How much are we actually doing? This is the really depressing thing. If you look at what I would call effective recycling, making new products from those articles which have been used, thrown away, we're only doing that for 2% of the plastic. 2% is tiny. That's the figure that we need to be building on. We need to be recycling more to new products. So we're recycling quite a lot, and that's going up. But for the best possible recycling, which is doing the job which I've identified, saving, making new polymer, it's not much. So why don't we recycle more polymer? Because it's difficult. It's actually difficult to turn old products, used stuff, into new products because it's expensive. Costs and logistics of gathering it, cleaning it, sorting it, and then making new pellets. Profit margins are very small. Oil prices, they're going up, but they're still actually very low. So virgin polymer is cheap. And there just isn't enough profit margin to make recycling viable. Yes.
Isn't this then just a question of public policy?
Yep.
In the sense that it's well accepted that we subsidize farming, for example, and presumably one could subsidize plastic recycling if one felt it was a national goal.
When you're a politician, it would be really good if you could get that message across. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's policy, it's government policy. In the UK, government policy for all of this sort of thing is put legislation in place, force the private sector to deal with it, and that will mean that quite a lot of the companies go bust. That's life. The rest of them will be stronger. It's pretty brutal, but yes.
And then also it greatly encourages the easy living.
Yeah, absolutely.
It builds up a wonderful criminal opportunity.
Yeah. So the real barrier at the moment is economics. There are also technical challenges. It is technically difficult to make really good quality new polymer from old, but it can be done. People are working really hard on this. It's a wonderful area for researching, and there's a bit of funding around now, which is great. There are some simple things that we could do to do more recycling now. Reducing the number of polymers that we use makes it easier to sort them, and it means that we're taking some of the difficult to recycle ones out. So that's good. And there are really simple things. Now, these are fizzy drinks bottles, 2-litre fizzy drinks bottles from Sainsbury's. They used to be green. If you have green polymer, you can't take the green colouring out. And that means that you can't reuse that polymer for any application where you want a clear polymer, which is most of them. And so the sale price is very, very low. Simple solution, make the bottles clear. And that makes the recycling a lot easier. The barrier to that is the marketing people who say, but people like their green bottles. Well, actually, people can be quite sensible. And so we've got over that one, and there's a lot more clear plastic around. That message has got through, which is great. That's improving recycling capabilities a lot. So, what can we do? Let's start thinking about some solutions here. Food packaging. It's heavily contaminated with food. How about you have packaging that when you throw it away with the food, and it degrades in the same way as the food in industrial composting, for instance. Well, there are companies that are doing that. They've been doing that for some time. So this is one in my college, Packaging Environmental. That's great, but there are some problems. This is a compost heap, and the plastic is degrading in that with the food, but plastic doesn't actually degrade as fast as food in most cases. And in domestic compost heaps, that packaging probably doesn't degrade at all. And so even though it says it's compostable, it should be degrading, it's not actually getting there yet, even if it gets into the right place. So people are working on that, it's getting better, but we're not there yet. So why not biodegradable plastic? So popular belief, bio-derived polymers, biodegradable polymers, that's green, that's the way to go. Well, not quite. I won't go into this because I'm already probably babbling on much too long, but most biodegradable polymers are the ones that will eventually degrade in the compost heap. They're actually made from fossil sources rather than from bio-based sources. So they're not bio-derived, but they are biodegradable. And actually most biodegradable polymers come, yeah. So there's a lot of confusion about terminology there. And if you're making polymers from bio-based sources, that isn't something which is the sort of stuff that you grow in your garden. This is industrial scale agriculture, and it's environmentally horrible, absolutely appalling. Fertilizers, pesticides, vast areas of land which have been degraded and will take decades to recover if they even get the chance. Industrial scale agriculture is really terrible. So that's not good. When we've actually got these polymers and we're trying to get them into the right place, into the composting waste stream, they get rejected because they're plastics. They are plastics. They look like plastics. You can't distinguish them from the normal plastics which don't biodegrade. And if these plastics, these biodegradable plastics, get into the ordinary polymer waste stream, they contaminate them. It means that maybe a whole batch of really good stuff that you have to throw away because you've got a little bit of biodegradable polymer. So people are very, very careful about what goes into those waste streams. Another thing which is really important is that we're not making very much of these. These bio-based polymers, they're about 1 to 2% of the amount of polymer that's made. It's going up, but it's still absolutely tiny. And there is not capacity for increasing that using the current feedstock. It'll get there eventually, but not in the next decade. We need completely new feedstock to be able to make appreciable amounts of these bio-based polymers. So there isn't enough to make a difference. Niche applications, food applications to some extent, but not all of our polymer applications. So, what should we be doing? The 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. We know about those from the domestic environment, from our everyday life, but they're really important for plastics as well. So, reduce the number of articles, don't buy things that you don't need, don't use plastics for anything that's just, cheap and cheerful and trivial and you don't need it. So that's a no-brainer, but we need to do a lot more of that. We can reduce the amount of material, making our packaging as thin as possible. Now, I was talking about cheese earlier. The best cheese packaging, which does the job best for the cheese and is the thinnest, that's not easily recyclable. If we want something that's recyclable, we have to use more packaging, and so we increase the amount of material with a bigger environmental footprint. So that's a bit of a difficult one. So reducing the amount of packaging means different materials sometimes, and there's a balance. Reuse. Those are things that I reuse, my plastic bottle and my drinks cup. That's good. It means that we don't need so many articles, and these are mine, so I can wash them. I can keep reusing those. Let's have a look at plastic bags. Okay, so a little case study here about reuse. Plastic bags have been banned in various countries, including in the UK. And so people are encouraged to have nice cotton bags, which they reuse. So how many times do you have to reuse them for the environmental footprint to be better than a plastic bag? Okay, that's what we're looking at. So how do you measure environmental footprint? One of the simplest ways is climate change, global warming potential. How much energy does it take? But you could measure environmental footprint in other ways. So pollution from agriculture, nitrous oxide, that sort of thing, but also water. Water is really important with agriculture in a lot of parts of the world and getting worse. That's a really big factor. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But for the moment, let's just look at carbon footprint. So we take a disposable Sainsbury's carrier bag as our baseline. So that's a single-use bag, but because we're really responsible, actually we're going to use that after its first life for putting our rubbish in. So it does actually have 2 lifetimes in this study. So that's our baseline. We'll throw away very thin plastic bag. We're going to compare that to Sainsbury's bag, which is the bag for lunch. What's called a non-woven polypropylene bag, a bit more robust. It doesn't look so plastic. People think that might be better. So that bag there, we had to reuse 4 times. to the equivalent of our bin bag. This one, 11 times. A paper bag, 3 times. But there are things about paper that I don't have time to tell you. It's got a big environmental footprint in it, with other factors other than carbon. And then the cotton bag, 131 times. So do you use your cotton bag 131 times? Well, congratulations, most people don't. If it's an organic cotton bag, you've got to use it 400 times. That's because it takes more resources to make things organically. They're less productive, so more water, more fertilizer, even if it's an organic source. So the production is less environmentally satisfactory than for ordinary cotton. So you win on one thing, but you lose on the other. So 400 times for your organic cotton. But if we look at another metric, that's in very small print, it's a really bad news here. If you look at water as the metric, you have to use your organic cotton bag 7,000 times for it to be the equivalent of that disposable bag. So, the unpalatable conclusion is that if you're looking at the global warming potential, at some of the environmental factors, you are better off using a throwaway plastic bag. All the others have bigger factors. Yeah.
So I use my single plastic bag, I fold it up, put it in my pocket and use it time and time again. That's the best.
That is the best, congratulations. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Good. So this is a really difficult message to get through to the general public. It's not at all what they want to hear. But there we are. So that's what we're up to. So, what should we be doing? Talk a bit about recycling. Recycling it's good if we can do it. It's difficult. People don't know what they should be putting in their recycling bin. I talked with somebody who was in charge of, the UK recycling program, and he said, I don't know what to put in my bin either. It's very difficult to know. There are regulations everywhere that are different, for good reason, because there are different waste management companies and they do things in different ways. But for anybody to be able to do it properly, we need to have uniform regulations which we can understand. So we have a real problem there. So there are lots of knee-jerk reactions around. People say, get rid of all plastic packaging and ban all single-use plastic. So here's an example. France, banning plastic packaging at the January 1st this year. So some fruit and vegetables, firstly fruit and vegetables, including the cucumber. So I was so upset and angry when I saw this. This is not the right thing to do. So let's look at cucumbers. Cucumbers are quite fragile. The skins get damaged very easily. If you scratch, if you dent the cucumber, it rots. If it's in the shop, people won't buy it, and so it becomes food waste because it's got a little scratch in it, and it then rots more quickly. The cucumber dries out, and so after 3 days, it's all floppy, and people won't buy it. If you use less than a gram of thin plastic packaging, it preserves its shelf life by an order of magnitude and avoids a lot of waste. there was, I think it was Austria, who introduced a ban on packaging of vegetables in shops. And their wastage of cucumbers went up by a factor of, I think it was 30. So not 30%, but 30, the wastage of cucumbers, because they didn't have this packaging. Now, in the response to this, there were lots of people who said, wonderful, wonderful, way to go. And we don't need to package our cucumbers. What's the skin on a cucumber for? That's natural packaging. That was actually incorrect, and there is plenty of factual evidence against that. So a small amount of packaging really does save a lot of food waste. In the shop, transport home, even in your fridge at home, it's helpful. So, not a good knee-jerk reaction. What should we be doing? We've looked at biodegradable, superficially plausible, but we're not there yet, and there are some difficult factors there. Knee-jerk reactions, try to avoid. Need to think about it first. But more considered responses. Here is some packaging which doesn't look like plastic. It's actually doing the job well. On some definitions, this would be plastic, because plastic is a technical term describing a sort of material. But this is natural, plant-based, it biodegrades, and people aren't going to worry about using that as food packaging. If we have more of this, then that's a good way to go. But it's a niche. There need lots and lots of different sorts of packaging to fulfill all the regulations there. So that's a good way to go. So, some conclusions. What should we do? Recognize that plastics are a very good thing. So our use of plastics saves an awful lot of other resources. If we substitute other materials, the environmental footprint is bigger, much bigger, in all cases. But waste plastic is what dominates public perception of plastic, and it's that that's driving all of these knee-jerk reactions and the way that we're going now. So, you're sensible, and I've been talking about systems and how we need to look at our plastic packaging in context for the job that it does and its environmental benefits, and not just at what happens at the end of life. And packaging reduces food waste. If you replace it with other things, there's a bigger environmental impact. Bio-based, biodegradable polymers, great for the future, but the future is not here yet. And there are some difficult questions. There's lots of work going on, alternative materials, designed for recyclability. So what can we do? We can reduce. Don't use plastics that we don't need, but don't stop using plastics that we do need. So be sensible. Reuse, basically good. So don't have single-use anything, and not just plastic, but anything. And do more recycling. It's the end of life. It's the waste plastics that is a problem. Get more of it into the recycling stream, and we will be able to recycle more. So anybody who's got hotlines to government anywhere can get them to increase the recycling capacity and subsidize all those poor companies that are trying to make life better for us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.